we are bringing in a poll at the beginning here, and so we wanted to ask you a couple of questions just to gauge our audience and go from there. So the first question here is, how many years of state service do you have? It posted in a different order for you than me. So we'll start with the first question, which is your role in accounting team? What is your role on the accounting team in your agency? That is technician, accountant, manager, or other. And so we can see those results coming in, and thank you for the participation. The second question here is, how many years of state service do you have? And that's going to be between 0 and 2, 2 to 5, 5 to 10, or 10 plus years. We have 101 responses on the years of service. Awesome. So looking at the first question, which is what is your role? It looks like a majority are the accountant role. So we have 21% technician, 60% accountant, and 14% manager, 5% other. It's still updating, so we'll go ahead and leave it there. Years of service, 12% at 0 to 2 years, 22% at 2 to 5, 20% at 5 to 10, and 43% with 10 plus years. Wow. Way to go, everybody. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and go over the agenda real quick. Thank you for participating in the poll, and we will work out the kinks next time, because yeah, for me also, question 1 disappeared very quickly and became question 2. So thank you for giving that a test run for us this morning. So today we're going to cover topics. First is going to be the 2026 calendar update. Then we're going to talk about clearing document supported general ledger accounts, the DAFM 348, D23 review and acceptable legal legislation, system generated and statewide interface batches. And then we're going to talk about DAFJ 1651. Then we're going to talk about the new and exciting direct deposit authorization form and our electronic submission for that. Then we're going to talk about the 44 screen and the 47 screen. And then we're going to talk about upcoming projects and timelines for those. And then we're going to have a review of R-Star's training materials available. And then last but not least is going to be a Datamart update. So with that, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Carlene to talk about the 2026 calendar.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I know this is a beloved topic for us, and it's a lot of excitement for you guys, but the 2026 calendar is complete and ready for you. It's now available out on our website under the Stay Scheduled tab or section. It's kind of down at the bottom of the screen. New this year, we've added when the statewide balancing reports are available. SARS has requested that we include this now that we are the OSC group, not just SFMS. So you will now have a pre-look at when those statewide balancing reports are available. Also, because of when Easter happens this year, Financial Archive has been delayed, so there will be system impacts instead of at the very beginning of the month of April. It's now going to be towards the end of the month, down here, the 24th through the 27th. And then the year-end cycle is soft close. It's going to be on the 8th of of August, the 7th of August. The 14th will be the end of month close, and then the year-end close program will run on the 28th of August. Any questions regarding the calendar for 2026? Anything that you would like to see on the calendar to be included? Please contact me or your SFMS analyst, and they will send those messages on to the group of us that actually produce it. No questions? Okay, I'm going to turn this over, because this was just really quick, to Liz. She's going to talk about clearing doc supported.
All right, thank you, Carlene. Good morning, my name is Liz, and I will be talking about clearing document-supported general ledger accounts for AY25. So if you've been in these user groups in the past, this is a training we do every November in odd-numbered years to prepare for the close of the appropriation year. So there are some specific actions the agency needs to take related to this, and your SFMS analyst will be reaching out as well to provide additional information to make sure this gets completed. I do want to let you know I have a lot of slides coming up with specific examples. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on each of those slides, but I want you to take away that those slides are here when you're working on these. We've got a lot of information you can refer back to. And as you're going, if you have questions along the way, please reach out to myself or to your SFMS analyst, because we are working to support you to make sure all of this will be done in time for AY25 official close. So a little bit of background about appropriation years. We currently have 2 appropriation years open in RSTARS. We have AY25 and AY27. The 6-month closeout period for AY25 will be ending on December 31st. So prior to that, agencies must take action on any outstanding AY25 document-supported balances before the AY closes. So I've got some terms in here. The first one, what do I mean when I'm saying document-supported general ledger account balances? So really that are specific GLs in RSTARS that are considered document-supported. So I have the list here of all the GLs that this includes. We've got mostly accounts receivable. There are some other non-receivables that are included in that. And for those agencies that record encumbrances in RSTARS, those would be included as well. So this slide has the complete list of GLs that we're talking about for this particular part of the training. So document supported, what that really means related to RSTARS is if you're recording transactions using any of those GLs that were listed on the prior slide, that allows RSTARS to track the balances for those documents on the 64 screen. So we've got an example 64 screen here. Typically these are invoices, and it will allow you to track all activity to that invoice and see what the outstanding balance is. If there is an outstanding balance related to one of these AY25 documents, that indicates that the agency needs to take some sort of action prior to the end of AY25. So there's a couple of different options agencies need to take to move those account balances. So it does take some review to look at what documents are outstanding. The different options are you can reclassify the balance from AY25 to AY27. That's the most common one we see. It's still a valid balance. You just need to move it into the new AY. Another option is you may need to adjust the AY25 balance to 0. Maybe there was an error in your entry. Maybe it was an invoice and the payment didn't get applied to that invoice, so you just need to reduce the invoice balance if it's not an amount that's still due. The final option is potentially if you've met all the requirements to write it off. There's a lot of information in the OAM about write-offs, so that would be another option if that is no longer an AR you are expecting to collect and you've done all the steps to be able to write it off, you can write it off in AY25. So just a note on the bottom of the slide, as I mentioned, number one is the most common that we see agencies doing. If you're just reclassifying it from one AY to another AY, it's all in the same D23 fund, the same PCA coding. That entry is going to net to zero. It's not going to have any financial statement impact. If you're choosing one of the other options and you're concerned it's a material amount and it relates to prior fiscal years, you may want to reach out to your SARS analyst on that just to make sure there's not going to be any financial statement impact. Again, this is pretty uncommon, but if you are adjusting balances to zero because of errors and it relates to a prior accounting period, you might want to reach out to SARS and see if any adjustment is needed if that's a material amount. So why do we have to do this process every 2 years for AY close? If you attended our May user group, we talked a bit about general fund accounts receivable balances. There is a requirement in the OAM. We have the link here on this slide to that OAM about moving those general fund AR balances by June month end close. So those should already be done. You know, if that hasn't been done, please do it now. But there is a specific requirement for the general fund side. What we're seeing mostly now for biennium close is other AY25 document supported balances, other funds, federal funds, and we want to zero those out before the appropriations lapse at the end of the December. Those ones aren't specifically covered in the Oregon Accounting Manual, but we do need to reclassify those to the new AY just to make sure any subsequent transactions, liquidations, payments, collections will be recorded in the correct appropriation year. And if agencies don't roll those forward, you can run into errors. So how the 64 screen works is when you set up an invoice, if you're recording a subsequent transaction, a payment on that invoice, the system, when you put in that reference document, it's going to try to pull in the same coding that was used on the original invoice. And if that's a prior AY, that appropriation is now closed and you'll run into errors. So the SFMS analysts are working with you to try to make sure everything gets rolled forward so you won't run into errors down the road. You know, if you have something that you're trying to clear out, a prior AY invoice, and the appropriation is closed, you're going to have to work with your SFMS analyst to get that addressed. Okay, so that's some background on kind of why we're doing this, what the deadlines are, what your different options are. In the next slides, I'm going to go through examples of specific entries that need to be made. The exact T codes that you're going to use for these entries are really going to depend on which GL and what T code was used to originally set up that document supported document. I'm going to go through some of these examples pretty quickly, but what I want you to take away is that these are here for you when you're working on this. You can go back and look to them. We also have a link here to our SFMS desk manual, which has a lot of specific instructions that are really helpful for agencies. So please take a look at that, look at these slides. If you're not finding the answers to your questions, reach out to myself or your SFMS analyst. So the first step in the process really is understanding what your population is. There's a couple different ways you could go about doing that. I had that slide previously with all the GLs. You could run some queries and see what balances you have for AY25. What we really recommend is ordering the DAFR 9750 report. This report will show you all documents and their document balance. You can order it for AY25, so you can get your population of documents that need some sort of action by December 31st. We do have an example on this slide of how you would order that from the 91 screen. You want to make sure the AY is AY25. You can order these reports any Friday. Make sure you've got your agency as the special select. If you have any questions about ordering the report or accessing these reports after you've ordered them, again, your SFMS analyst is a great resource to help you with that. So once you get that population of here's all the documents that need to be addressed, we recommend categorizing them based on what T code they were created with. So the examples I have on here align with what you'll see in the SFMS desk manual of the different categories. And then there's specific instructions and T code guidance on how to correct each of these. So let's walk through an example here. For a transfer in AR document, that was something that the original AR was set up with T code 109 or 174. You can either collect it with T code 173. So if you know that you're going to get payment in full on that invoice before December 31st, you can just follow that normal process. If you don't expect to get payment before then, you can adjust it to 0 in AY25 and then reestablish it in the new AY. Or if it meets the criteria, you can write it off. So here's an example of what that looks like. This is the original invoice that was set up. And this is what it would look like on the 64 screen, showing that there's still a balance. So in this example, the agency is reclassifying it to the new AY. So they would make an entry to adjust that AR document to 0 in AY25. After they made this entry, they would see the 64 screen is now clear for that. But we're not quite done yet. We do have to reestablish it in AY27. So we'll establish it again. You can put the reference document information in there. It's not going to tie anything to the 64 screen for this, but if you want to have that in your queries. One thing to remember when you're reestablishing it in AY27 is keep the same due date as the original invoice. We are establishing it in a new AY, but we want to have proper aging reports. So after you make that adjustment, you will see you can look up that new document number on the 64 screen, see that balance, and then any future payments or adjustments you need to make to that invoice, you would use the new invoice number. So for the other categories, it's a similar process. The T codes are going to vary a little bit, but you're going to have all those options of you can either collect it to 0 it out before the end of December, you can adjust it to 0, reestablish it, or you can write it off. So we have the same example for negative accounts receivable. These aren't as common. There's a couple more options depending on what T code you use to set up that negative AR. We have deposit liability ARs. We're not going to have write-offs for those, but you still have 2 different options on how to clear those for AY25 as well. And then we have other receivables. This is the most common category we see. So there's a lot of different potential T codes. I do want to walk through a quick example of adjusting one of these to 0 and then reclassifying in the new AY with T code 213. So in this example, our original invoice was set up with T code 199. That's probably one of the most common T codes we see for ARs. And we can see for this document, AR 014255001, we have a document balance sitting there. So we know we need to take some sort of action because this is an AY25 balance. We're going to adjust it to 0 in AY25. So we've got our T code 107R to do that. We put our reference document 001 in there. In the same batch, we are then going to use a T code 213. We're going to, again, use that same due date to keep our proper aging. But what we're going to do in the reference document is we're going to use the same AR 014255, but we're going to choose a brand new refdoc suffix that does not already exist on the 64 screen. So we're going to do 002. This allows us to keep that same document number, but it's going to create a new screen on the 64 for that brand new suffix. For agencies that want to keep that document numbering, T code 213 can help you do that. For this entry, you'll notice the doc amount is 0. We're putting this all in one batch. So we're adjustment out of AY25 into AY27 will net to 0. So after we do that, if we look on the 64 screen, we'll see our suffix 001 that related to AY25 is now 0, as we would expect. For AY27, we've got the new suffix 002, and that's where our balance is now sitting. So just a note of caution about T code 213. We have seen agencies run into some errors that will require a system cleanup if it's not used appropriately. So be careful when you're using this T code or any T code that adds a suffix to an existing document, supported document. Make sure on that reference document, you're putting a brand new suffix that doesn't already exist on the 64 screen. We really recommend if you make an entry error after you've saved T code 213, don't try to change it or delete it. Just save it, and then you can make another entry to correct it. What happens is you won't see an error immediately, but later on, when you try to make an entry using that reference document, you could run into what's called an EBH, reference document on hold error. And basically, you can't make any entry at that point. You'll need to reach out to your SFMS analysts, and we'll have to do a cleanup. And we see that with T code 213. So just be really careful when you're making those entries that everything is accurate before you hit save. So the next section is the non-receivable documents. It follows a similar pattern. These are specific GLs 0573, 1604, and 1550. We have all of these same instructions in our SFMS desk manual for you to refer to later. There's a couple different options for that, depending on the advance. You can liquidate it with T code 150 or T code 229, depending on whether you got the money collected back or not. If you need to reclassify it, you would use T code 434 and 435 to move it forward. These are kind of similar to some of our other entries that you'll see for unreimbursed advances. GL 1604, unearned revenue, if you have that, you've got a couple of options here. If you're reclassifying it, it's T code 443 in AY25, T code 444 in AY27. And this one is similar to T code 213. You're going to be assigning a brand new ref doc suffix if you're using this T code combination. 1550, deposit liabilities, also a similar process. There's a couple different options. I'll go through some slides quickly to show you an example of that. If it meets the criteria, it's not a deposit liability anymore. You can reclass it to revenue. If you need to move it forward, you can use T code 430, 431. Again, that's another one like T code 213, where you're assigning a new reference document suffix. So for this example for deposit liabilities, if you have a deposit liability, here's our original one set up with T code 165 for $350. You might have a combination. Maybe you want a portion of it to be reclassed to revenue. So in this example, we're reclassing $200 of that to revenue. We would do that with T code 398 and 399. Both of those entries are going to be in AY25. So after we've reclassed a portion to revenue, if we look at the 64 screen, we'll see we still have $150 remaining. And if we want to move that forward to AY27, we would use T code 430 and 431. So we've got our deposit liability with 001 suffix on the 430 entry to zero out AY25. T code 431 to set it up in AY27, and we're assigning a brand new suffix 002 to move that forward. We'll have two different 64 screens. We'll have suffix 001 that's now 0 for AY25 like we expect. And then we'll see the balance moved forward to AY27 with suffix 002. Finally, encumbrances. Not all agencies encumber, but if your agency does encumber, we do have a system job that's run. It'll be run on December 8th this year to automatically zero out any AY25 encumbrances. So there's not as much work agencies need to do on those. If there's encumbrances that you need to set up for AY27, you would reestablish the encumbrance in the new AY, but you can let the system job zero it out for you for AY25. If you have questions on this, reach out to your SFMS analyst. Again, we don't have every agency use encumbrances, but that information is also in the SFMS desk manual if you need it. So I went through a lot of information there. I don't expect everyone to have absorbed all that. The main takeaway I want you to know is there is some work to do for AY25 close. We have resources in these slides. This recording and these slides will be available on our website. We also have the desk manual, and we have myself and the analyst to help you. The analyst will also be sending out information to their agency contacts, trying to follow up on documents that still may need to be rolled forward. So please let us know if you have questions on that process so we can try to make it as smooth as possible. Any questions that anybody has?
Doesn't seem to be any, Liz. I did just want to make mention that we also have your handout, and it is in the chat if everybody wants to grab it.
Perfect. Thank you, Amber. The handout will be mentioned a little bit later in the training, but that's also another resource on things agencies need to consider for biennium close. And again, you may not have questions now, but we expect you to run into questions as you're going through this. So please feel free to reach out. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Alan.
Thank you, Liz. Good morning, everyone. My name is Alan Park, and I'm going to talk to you about the biennial encumbrance and pre-encumbrance liquidation program. So the objectives of DAFM 348 are to liquidate pre-encumbrances and encumbrances in our stars. There's also a companion job called PCHB 0348 that cancels requisitions and purchase orders and ad picks. We refer to both jobs together in this presentation as DAFM 348. It's a little simpler to discuss. This liquidation program runs every 2 years before the biennium close. So this year it is scheduled for Monday, December 8th. The Oregon Accounting Manual, Chapter 20, provides definitions for pre-encumbrances and encumbrances. And this slide has a link to that OAM. So a pre-encumbrance represents the intent to purchase goods or services. An encumbrance represents a formal commitment to purchase goods or services within the current biennium. Not sure if there have been pre-encumbrances, earlier in the history of our stars. For the last several years, I've not seen any pre-encumbrance activity, but and only a few agencies do encumbering. OAM goes on to say that to charge obligations against a prior biennial appropriation, the service must be performed or supplies must be received by June 30th, and the vendor must be paid by December 31st. If at the end of a biennium, goods or services for an encumbered spending commitment have not been received by June 30th, you should cancel the encumbrance or the remaining balance for partially fulfilled contracts and reestablish the encumbrance in the new biennium. So canceled by this program. The comptroller GL account on the transaction must be either 2735, which is encumbrance, or 2736, which is the pre-encumbrance. The appropriation number must have an effective end date on the R-STARS appropriation profile that is less than January 1, 2026. And the document and suffix must either have a zero balance and no close date, or it must have a positive balance on the document financial table or the 64 screen. Records meeting this criteria will be interfaced to R-STARS, and any purchase orders or requisitions in AdPix that interface to R-STARS are canceled. Towards the end of December 2023, we turned AdPix security to view only. So for the first 6 months of the current AY, agencies did have the ability to go in and create transactions in AdPix, and there were some that were made. So there will be a few encumbrances created out of AdPix that will be closed this time. So the interface records will process with the nightly batch cycle on Monday, December 8th, and any errors will hold on the agency's 530 screen. Many of you remember the year-end close job that occurred at the end of August this year. And those errors showed up on agency 999 screen, but errors for adapting 348 will show up on your own individual agency's 530 screen. So what are your responsibilities? So on or before December 8th, you must make sure that your 25 profile for fiscal year 26 shows that December is open so that any entries can post. That's, seems like unnecessary to say because, we're only about a quarter of the way through the month. So obviously the month will be open for December activity, but nonetheless, the transactions would error if that were to happen. So also you will be able to view the posted transactions from the program on your DAFR 2251 and 2261 control reports beginning each night that they post. So if you need to make sure, you need to make sure that you have someone with active user class 49 to be able to make corrections to the transactions and to release the batches until all the transactions post. If an error is caused by an agency controlled profile, for example, PCA or index, those profiles will need to be temporarily modified in order to clear the transactions. If any appropriation number profiles have an effective end date of less than December 31st, 2025, those transactions will reflect an error of E5B, valid effective date /20 date. For those errors, please contact your SFMS agency analyst. Any transactions that error due to an inactive vendor will be handled centrally. Please email any vendor activation request to the vendor desk using a normal vendor activation process. The 530 screen will be available Tuesday morning, December 9th, but please refrain from going into the Y batches until we complete our program validation. And I will send out an SFMS news once the validation is complete. If you have any questions with any transactions that might error, please contact either me or your assigned SFMS agency analyst, and their contact information is listed here. Any questions today about this process?
I don't see any, Alan. Thank you.
All righty. At this point, I will turn it over to Carlene.
Good morning again. One of my favorite subjects is D23s because I do a lot of them, especially around bonds. And I just am talking on one single aspect of the D23, and that is the acceptable legal legislation. And what I'm talking about when I say I need acceptable legal legislation, also where to put it on the form, because I've been getting a number of forms that are absolutely blank in that screen. So what legal legislation is acceptable is House bills, Senate bills, emergency board minutes, ORSs, and the Oregon Constitution, which is very rare when I have one that comes through with an Oregon Constitution, but it is valid and available for your use. SFMS, when we're talking about appropriate legal legislation, is we're always looking at the budgetary or spending language on the bill that's granted by the legislature. SARS, on the other hand, if this is a new program, they really want that the legislation that set up this new program. Now, if this is a continuing program and you've been using it for a while, they don't need that language anymore. Just the first time that you request a D23 to set up the funds for that new program. But SFMS is always looking for budgetary language. Once you've identified it, the place that the magic place is right here. It needs that the SB HB emergency board minutes and their sections. If it's the very large bill, please put the section. If it's 1 or 2 pages, I'll find it. But if it's a bill basically beyond 3 pages, please put the section number on it. Oddly enough, I was in a conversation with Justin yesterday, and he did not know this, so I thought I'd share this little tidbit. The 20 screen may be the lifeline you are looking for the legal legislation. And I'm saying this with a great deal of, sometimes, not always, an appropriation number that you're using on that D23 request actually has, well, it always has the bill number and section number on it, but it may actually be appropriate and it, for the legislation for that D23 request. So be sure when you are looking at the 20 and the cited source that you do confirm, you go to that piece of legislation and say, oh yes, this is perfect. I can use this. Yay, I don't need to go any further. And in this case, in this example, I'm showing you SB 692 is the bill. It's from the 83rd session, so that was in 2025, the one that just ended. The bill line is the 32nd, so this is the section, and if it has a subsection, it's going to be under the rider number. The 20 screen is set up by Sabres, so they are working actively. Oops. They are working actively with your budget people. So they are the ones that are putting, apologize, I forgot. Anyway, in this case, I then went and I saw, oh, notwithstanding any expenditures or the amount, the $1 million, there's your budget information. This is what we're looking for. It may not look like this. It may look slightly different in other bills, but we're looking for that budgetary information. So I'm hoping that that gives you a nice jumping off point. Legislation that is never, ever, ever appropriate, and I cannot emphasize this enough, is anything that provides treasury funds. It's not budgetary in nature. So when you get those budget bills or budget treasury notifications that we're setting up treasuries for bonds, you're always going to see ORS 286A.820. The language in this bill allows the DAS CFO office exclusive rights to establish XIQ bond treasury, which receipted accounts at treasury for upcoming bond activity for this all state agencies. Or if you have any legislation that contains the language separate and distinct from the general fund. This is language used to start a treasury fund granted to you by the legislature. Obviously, these are not budget in nature. Now, the budget may be in a section of that same bill, but the section that says separate and distinct from the general fund is not a spending authority. It just says you get a checking account. So why is legal legislation so important? Cited legal legislation is absolutely the first thing that SFMS reviews on the D23 funds. If it's not correct, SFMS must return the request form and have you per procedures, and these are SOS audited procedures and forms, profiles. So, you need to ask yourself, did you include the legislation or is it blank? Is it correct legislation? And is the citation appropriate and complete? In other words, did you not just cite it, but did you give me the section number if it's a very large bill? SFMS will return the form via email, including the reason why we're returning the form. If we need to return the form, the process starts and it delays the D23 timeline for that agency. So, in conclusion, help us help you, because you know your agency best. So sometimes if you call me up or email me and say, I don't know where to get this, I can kind of give you tidbits and crumbs and say, well, you might go here, you might go there, but I really don't know where the legislation is. So to ensure that that we process your request accurately, efficiently, please provide as much detail on that D23 as possible. If you need a second set of eyes, if you're new to this, or if you're just not sure it's gonna pass your manager's review or my review, I am always available and really super happy to do a pre-review of all of your D23 requests prior to you sending it to your manager, to make sure that it's complete and accurate and will pass my review. It's just a quickie review, and it's a great way to catch some of the common errors that I see. Also, if you're looking for a refresher, or if you've never done a D23 and you would like a little bit more information on this, because I literally am only doing one small section of a D23 request, we do have a D23 basic and advanced training on our website. Amber was so kind as to include the links in the presentation for me, so you can go out and look at it. And I believe she has bookmarked it. Amber, you can jump in here and correct me if I'm wrong. Bookmarked the different sections so that you can cherry pick what you are interested in versus having to watch the whole presentation. But the presentation's great. Liz did a great job, and we had some special guests from SARS and Treasury talking. So I think it's well worth the effort. Any questions? Any concerns about the information that I have presented? Please let me know. Okay, does it look like it? So move forward. The next topic is the system-generated statewide interface batches with Marie.
Hi, good morning, everyone. We have a pretty easy and quick topic. Looks like everybody's our experts today in our meeting, so I hope it's not boring. Just look at it as a quick reminder. So as everybody knows, here's the 530 screen. That's what it looks like. Not so complex or crazy. So let's talk about a couple batches. System will generate these batches. Usually you would not see these batches if they would not carry any errors. So they will generate overnightly batch cycle, they will release, they will clear, morning, you will see nothing. But if you see any of these batches on your 530 screen, I just want to point out some highlights, just some cautious. Let's just start with W batch. This W batch is usually generated with liquidation or cancellation. When we do stop pays or warrant cancels, so if warrant get canceled, you will see as a WC. If you see warrant stops, then you will see as a WS. So these batches, when errors come back to 530 screen, they will come back as an edit mode 3. And usually agencies, always, agencies don't have authority to update W batches. Agency doesn't have a user class. If there was, agency will check the error on W batches with F2. Please make sure never do F11, F4. That will stamp user ID on W batch and would not clear. So view your W batches with F2 and update your profiles. Most common errors comes back. It is effective end date. It's past, or it is not appropriate effective end date on profiles, or some other like grant issues. It's not matched with PCA, that sort of stuff. Please get back to your profile screen based on the error. Update your profile screen. Request from your agency analyst to release the batch. And if it is necessary, you need to back and correct your profile screen. You can do it next day again. Then we have batch type 8 and 9. We receive a lot of requests sometimes or complain from the agencies. They try to update batches with T code 857. Please remember, PI batches with 857 T codes, it's not allowed to be updated. Only T code 850 agency can update codings on T code 850 payroll batches, but not 857. Only field can be updated on the payrolls with T code 857 is effective date. An agency cannot update that field. Please request from your agency analyst to update the effective date. Usually this comes up with cash errors. You don't have enough cash balances for previous months. You just want to move your payroll to the next month because it's when your money hits your balances. And again, review payroll batch with F2. F11, F4 will stamp agency user's ID and will prevent the batch go through the nightly cycle. Usually type 8 batch automatically goes through nightly cycle, but if you update T code 850, please make sure you release it again. And you can find more information about, we had just a couple of weeks ago, we had a T code training, and we have a great chapter on payrolls on that material. If you have any questions about payroll batches, how they lay out, or which one comes first and which one generate next, please refer back to our material. We try to put most important information in that training. Then we have N batches. N batches comes for deposit reconciliations. This batch generates with T code 332 when deposit reconcile from the 13 screen. Batch will error with errored batch will be on 530 screen with edit mode 3 for agency 999. Agency users can use user class 48 to view these batches. Again, it is this batch is not allowed for any profile or coding changes. Only update can be happen. It is effective date. And please request your agency analyst to release these batches. You can monitor this batch with F2. Again, view these batches with F2. Update your profiles, and then you request your agency SFMS analyst to release the batch for you. We have R batches for redemption. The redemption transactions completes the cycle begin with a voucher payable transaction that was entered by Encumbrance. The voucher payable generated a warrant that created a payment outstanding. The redemption of the warrant clears the payment outstanding. Correcting to these batches are rare. we cannot update again the codings of these batches. You will see this doc type as a ZW, months, days, and years. For you can please, when you're reviewing your 530 screens, monitor these R batches again with F2 and correct or update your profiles and request the agency analyst to release them for you. We have e-batches. E-batches are Oregon buys. This batch, Oregon buy transactions interface to our stars and appears as an e-batch. Oregon buys use VU as the document prefix on all transactions. Oregon buy batches as a interface will be held on a status of edit mode 0, meaning no system edits have been performed yet. And when go through the nightly batch cycle, if it had errors and bounce back on 530 screen will appear as a edit mode 3. So if you see these batches with edit mode 0, that means it interfaced it in same day and it's not released yet. And agency can use user class 28 and 78 to release these batches. And user with user class 17. And an accounting trans indicator of the 3 or 4 can edit this batch. And again, when this batch get really edit, user class 28 or 78 can release this batch. Very important fact about eBatch, SFMS agency analysts can assist you with questions on how to clear Oregon buy transactions or batch, but we cannot, we don't have information to support Oregon buy system. If you had any questions about interface and just how clear from the 530 screen, you can reach out to your agency analyst, to Liz or to Rose for interface issues. But any questions about Oregon buy, here some material page, that's procurement. It is a good page to refer back, or Oregon buy help desk would be the good resource to ask your questions about Oregon buys. And then we have CBATCH, they are cost allocation. We do not have many agencies. We have just 4 agencies, if I'm correct. Yes, we have just 4 agencies. They do cost allocation. This batch generate with T code 301 and 317 to allocate on our stars. Batch with errors will bounce back with edit mode 3. With the batch with the profile errors can be updated. Agency can go ahead and update the profiles and request the agency analyst to release them. An agency analyst will release them with user class 70. And then we have L batches for expiration and Y batches for general ledger close. I didn't put detail here because this happens once a year. And when it happens, your agency analyst will send out a guidance, what to do and how we can help you clear. Agency analysts will monitor your 530 screen to make sure this will be cleared when they appear. So you will get enough information when jobs runs and we expect these batches bounce back on 530 screen. So any questions? Just a big takeaway from this section is when you have system generated batches, usually agency user doesn't have authority to update the codings. And even SFMS analysts cannot update the codings because mainly that creates a mismatch with original transactions. Usually the only update we can do is effective date, or we can just release the batch for you back and review all of these batches with F2, please. And F11, F4 always will stamp agency user ID on it. And even if you take care of the errors, it will not clear the system until your agency analysts resave the batch and re-release it, so then batch can clear over the nightly cycle. Any questions? Yeah, it wasn't complicated, so have fun.
And next up, we have Alan Park, and he's going to talk about the DAFJ 1651 Biennium close.
Thank you, Amber. So, welcome back from the break, everyone. My next topic this morning is the biennial close job and a brief overview of the biennium closing requirements. Liz went into much more detail, but I'll just kind of reiterate a few things. So SFMS manages 3 programs in order to properly close the records of each biennium. At the end of August, the year-end close program creates closing entries that move the nominal GL balances to the appropriate equity accounts. In mid-December, the Encumbrance Liquidation program that I talked about earlier ensures proper matching of costs to the appropriate appropriation year as mandated by the OAM. And finally, on the last business day of December, the Biennium Close program inactivates prior biennium appropriation profiles. That is DAFJ 1651. So how does the Biennium Close job work? It's a very simple job. It's very straightforward. If the appropriation year on the RSTARS 20 screen is 2025, and the effective end date is less than or equal to December 31st, 2025, the program will inactivate the profile. Now on the screen, the appropriation year field is only 2 characters, so it'll show 25, but in the database behind the scenes, it's 2025. So in general terms, agencies must do the following before December 31st. Make final necessary entries for AY25 activity and clear any AY25 batches from the 530 screen. So in addition to these upcoming slides, we have included a handout in the user group materials, and Amber put a link in the chat towards the start of Liz's presentation. And so that's a great resource to refer to. Oh, and thank you again for reposting. So before December 31st, 2025, agencies need to make the final entries for AY25 for the following. First one is document supported balances, and Liz talked quite a bit about this. I just want to note that the SFMS desk manual REVE2 is a great resource for this topic. Lots of examples with screen prints of just how to make the necessary entries. The next is balance type 17, which is accrued expenditures, and balance type 18, which is encumbrances outstanding. Those balances need to be 0 by the end of by December 31st. You need to check your 62 screens for any AY25 appropriations with remaining balances and make sure that those are zeroed out. The one exception for that is capital construction appropriations. Those are excluded from this requirement. The next is balance transfers. Those AY25 balance transfer entries need to be completed by December 31st. Any financial statement adjustments. And finally, any reconciliations, the 13th screen for spots rebates and other deposits that are due to or that are AY25. So the encumbrance liquidation transactions that will be created on December 8th, they will have an effective date of December 31st. and an appropriation year of 2025 or less. Errors on these entries are typically profile-related errors, like the profile is inactive or the effective end date is not appropriate to allow the transaction to post. So you'll just need to work with your agency analyst to resolve those errors. 2 years ago, all of the DAFM 348 transactions were able to clear within three days. I expect less activity this time around, so hopefully it'll be less of a challenge to clear out those errors. AY25 voucher payable batches need to clear the 530 screen by December 31st. And the liquidation batch also needs to clear. So please process the final AY25 vouchers a couple of days ahead of time to allow for any possible errors that may need to be corrected. And also AY25 payroll retro transactions need to process in November run 2, which has a cutoff day and workday of Monday, December 8th. So if AY25 corrections are entered in workday after December 8th, they would then post in RStars in January when AY25 is closed. So it's very important to get those AY25 corrections in no later than Monday, December 8th and workday. So what to do with any AY25 transactions after December 31st depends on what those transactions are. So if it's payroll batch or transactions with a budgetary impact, you need authorization from your Sabres analyst before requesting that SFMS activate the appropriation. Agencies need to contact their SFMS analyst to request appropriation profiles be activated for accrued revenues, deposit liability, deferred revenue, or unreimbursed advances. So there are a few agencies that use RStar's cost allocation process each month. As Maria mentioned earlier, there's 4 agencies. So for December 2025 cost allocation, that will post in January, January 9th. Agencies need to work with your SFMS analyst to resolve any errors that may occur there. If you have any questions regarding the Biennium close process, please contact your assigned SFMS agency analyst. Their contact information is listed here. Anyone have any questions as of now?
I don't see any. Thanks, Alan.
All right, thank you. Next, I'll turn it over to Loretta.
Thanks, Alan. Hello and good morning, everyone. My name is Loretta Bryant. Today, I will be going over with you the updated State of Oregon Direct Deposit Authorization Form. Some of the topics we'll be covering today are who the form is for, what the form is, and what are some of the updates. We have an exciting and new electronic submission option, which we will walk through the process together of how to submit the form online. And we will also go over when the form will be available and where you can go to find the form. Who is the State of Oregon Direct Deposit Authorization Form for? The form is for vendors and State of Oregon employees to fill out and submit to SFMS if they want to register for direct deposit payments that are issued out of RStars. The default payment method in RStars is paper checks. If vendors and state employee want to instead receive direct deposit, they will need to fill out this direct deposit form. On this screen here is an example of how our vendors or state employees' banking information will appear on either the 52 or 51 vendor profile screen, and an example of a PDT or payment distribution type of DA. And that just means that the payment type or payment method is direct deposit. RStars users will not be able to see the banking information on the profile screens because this is kept within SFMS to limit exposure of sensitive information. For state employees, it is important to note that the direct deposit form we are going over today is for travel reimbursements that are issued out of RStars. This form is not to be used for direct deposit for payroll for your wages. Another important thing to note too is that the vendor or state employee must be set up in RStars prior to registering for direct deposit. So a profile must first be created by the agencies and activated by the vendor desk before we can process the form. Otherwise, I can't enter banking information into a profile that does not exist. What is the updated State of Oregon direct deposit form? If you have not yet had the chance to see the updated form, here it is. A major change that we've made to the form is we moved the instructions to page 1 to allow our vendors and employees the opportunity to see and read through the instructions before they begin filling out the form. And page 2 is the form fillable in PDF. And then the next few slides, we will be going over some of the different sections of the form and some of the updates that we've made to each section. Starting from the top of the form, we've added a box on the top left corner for agency payroll signature. This box is only applicable for state employees. Their agency payroll will check this box once they've validated their pre-established banking information in Workday. Moving down to section B of section A of the form is the payee information section where the vendor or state employee will fill in their contact information. So their name, mailing address, phone number, and email address. And for section A3, social security number, federal tax ID number, or for state employees, their OR number. This number should be the number that is established in RStars to receive payments. For example, state employees for travel reimbursements issued out of RStars are set up on the vendor profile screen with their OR number and not their social security number. So for state employees, you would provide your OR number in this field rather than your social security number. Section B of the form is the request type. Does the vendor or employee want to start or set up new direct deposit? Do they want to make changes to their direct deposit, or do they want to cancel their direct deposit to receive paper checks instead? And if they are canceling, they will need to provide the reason. Section C of the form is the financial institution section. We no longer require bank representative signature, but instead ask that the vendor attach a bank letter or voided check instead. For state employees, they can instead have their payroll certify the information for them. And section D of the form is the authorized signer section. We've changed our signature requirements and are now accepting either original wet blue ink signatures or Adobe digital certified signatures. How will the vendor submit their direct deposit authorization form? We now provide two options. The first option is they can mail the original form, no copies or faxes, into our office for processing. This is the same as before. The mailing address can be found on the instructions page of the form. And as I mentioned earlier, banking information is kept at SFMS to limit exposure of sensitive information. And because of this, we do ask that agencies please direct and reiterate to your vendors and employees to use this address if they want to mail their form. The second option is a new feature that we've added, and it is a secure online drop box if the vendor or employee wants to submit their form to us electronically. You can find the link to our secured online submission page on the instructions page. This slide here is an example of one of our vendors, Jane Doe. Jane has her form filled out completely, although you can't see it. Her signature on this form here meets the requirements, and let's pretend too that she included in this PDF a copy of her voided check, and she is ready to submit the form electronically. She navigates back to the instructions page and clicks on the blue hyperlink that is titled Here. A page to our secured online submission website then opens up on her browser. On here, Jane enters her email address, the number that is established in RStars to receive payments. She clicks on the Select Files button to open up her folder to retrieve and select her direct deposit form. She then hits the Submit button. And that's it. Easy peasy. The ACH coordinator has now been notified via email that Jane's form has been uploaded for processing. When will the updated direct deposit form be available? It's available now. The updated form was recently published on November 1st, so just last week. Starting November 1st through December 15th, we will accept both the old and updated versions of the direct deposit form. And after December 15th is the cutoff date, we will no longer accept the old versions. So please just discard the old versions if you have them saved onto your desktop. Where can you find the updated direct deposit form? The form can be found on our website. We recommend that you bookmark this ACH vendor direct deposit page to share with your vendors and employees. And as mentioned in the previous slide, we will no longer be accepting the old versions of the form, and bookmarking is recommended to ensure you are always providing to your vendors and employees the most current version of the form. And that concludes our topic on the updated direct deposit form. Are there any questions?
You do have some questions, Loretta.
Mm-hmm.
For the electronic drop box, it says that blue ink is required. Can you just refresh us what that means?
So when we're talking about the blue ink, that is if the user or the vendor or customer decides to print the form and fill it out. Sign it physically will need to be, the signature will be blue physical signed signature in blue ink.
Thank you. And then this form is for our AP vendor contacts, right?
That is correct.
Awesome. If the contact information, the mailing address, email address, etc., on the form is different from what has been established in SFMA, does DASH change the information in SFMA to match the form?
That is a really good question. Yes, we do. We do. Everything. So when I receive a form into the office, the information that is provided on the form will be updated on the profile.
Awesome. Okay, and then do recipients receive any sort of email confirmation of what the payment is for?
Yes, they do. They do. So once after a payment has been approved and released in RStars, the system will send out an email payment notification email to the email address that's on the 52 or 51 profile screen.
Okay. Some of them say some really great changes to the ACH form. So thank you, Loretta. And then what email address is used for the welcome email for the portal? Is it the email listed on the form or an email used when submitting the form or different?
It's always the email that's provided on the form. And if the email address on the form is different than the email address that's established or that's already on the 5251 vendor profile screen, that I will update the email address.
And then one of our users asks, they have an employee who does not want their home address entered anywhere for privacy reasons. Do they have to include the address?
They do not. Some of our state employees on their 5251 profile screen, they have the option to use their work address
Awesome.
as their mailing address. Mm-hmm.
All right, I don't see any more. Thank you so much, Loretta. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for all those exciting updates. Super excited to have that form out. I am here to talk about the 44 and 47 screens that are in RStars. I'm sure that we all use those all of the time, and this will just be a refresher, but with that, I did want to just do a poll real quick to see if you are using the 44 or 47 screen. And so the answers are yes, all of the time, or I know what they are for, but don't use them, or no, but I want to learn more about them. So with that, we'll give it just a second here. And thank you all for participating. Looks like we have a majority that say yes all of the time at 45%. And 20% are saying they know what they are for but don't use them. And 34% say they want to learn more. So that is exciting. So with that, we'll go ahead and get this started. And this is just for informational purposes to start with. If you have a payment number and that number begins with a 1, then that payment was issued with a warrant, or some might like to say paper check. And if the payment number is assigned with a 9 at the beginning, that means that the vendor filled out that wonderful ACH form that was previously presented, and they received an ACH payment. With that said, you can find the payment status on either the 44 or 47 screen. We have a quick poll for this slide here too. And as we start this little journey of the 44-47, the poll is just to ask whether or not you have direct communication with your vendor population, as we will be addressing it in that way. And this is very interesting. We have about 30% say yes and 70-ish% say no. Okay, that is good to know. And thank you for participating. So with that, we're going to go ahead and say that we're part of the 35%. It looks like it got updated. And so we have direct contact with the vendor, and the vendor is asking us about a payment. So in that scenario, we would go to the 3A screen and look up our vendor. We are then going to put a character, I like S for select, and then we're going to press F3, and that's going to be our vendor transaction inquiry. So with that, you will be brought to the vendor payment ledger, and that's where you're going to put your agency number and then your doc type. Just as a friendly reminder, any doc types that start with V are voucher, and so that means that a VP, VI, or those things are going to be the document types that you put in there. So for this one, it was a VP, and we used the training environment, so we had agency 926. So from here, we are going to be able to see the payment number. Let me actually go back because I want to make sure that we capture this. So the header for your document information is going to be listed right below. And I believe you can see my cursor. I'm not sure. But so we have the doc, and then we have the T code, and also what we're going to want to pay attention to here Oh, thank you. That's good to know. Anyway, sorry. So we look at the payment number, and that's in our header here. So we can see that this number here is our payment number. So with that, we can take this payment number and then we can go to the 44 screen. So with the 44 screen, you're going to enter your payment number. Then you're going to actually see the net amount of the payment and the document amount. And so a lot of times, just to clarify, that the document amount is going to be the absolute value of your document. That means that it's going to include any reversals or actually I'll say it this way, it'll include all the debit and credit transactions for the document. And so that's going to be reversals and the actual payments or actually credits. So those are the two different amounts that'll be listed on the screen. And the document numbers are also going to be there. And then also the payment distribution type, which was mentioned earlier. Just a for further information on that, you can look up the payment distribution types on the D50 screen. And so that's going to walk you through mailing, direct deposit, whether the payments are combined, and all of that good information. So that is the 44 screen and looking up the payment. Here is the payment status indicators. And so this is indicated on both the 44 and 47 screen. So you have I for issued, C for canceled, expired warrants. Those are more than two years old, and paid and stopped. So just a quick note for the ACH payments, the clearance date is the effective date of the direct deposit. And so that's going to usually be 2 days after the issue date. And so that's a kind of a key thing for our direct deposits. For the warrants, if the status is E, the clearance date will be the date the expired program runs. And so you'll learn or have learned about that from Carlene and the expired warrants process, but that is a process in which we expire all the warrants that are over 2 years old. If the payment has been canceled, this is going back to the 44 screen, if the payment has been canceled, there will be a cancellation reason and a document number for that warrant cancel. It should be a WC document. I will address the questions in a moment. Sorry, keep looking at the chat. So if it's canceled or stopped, there will be a reason code and the document number that listed at the top. And so the document is a WC for warrant cancel or WS for warrant stop. And the reason codes can be found on the D53. And just a quick recap of those reason codes. That's going to be 1 through 8. And so those actually come into play when you are requesting that the warrant cancel or warrant stop be placed. And so when you are requesting that those be placed, these are the reason codes that are then applied to that transaction. You can also get your payment number from the 86 screen. And so again, the transaction ID line is the start of the header that identifies each of the data fields that you can see for the document numbers. And so we can see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 block of characters in. On the first row is the document, or I'm sorry, the payment number. And so that is another place to find the payment number. You can also find it on the 84 screen when you are looking at the detailed information of a payment. And so it is in the payment number field there as well. So here's a quick look at the 47 screen. So the 47 screen displays a lot of the similar information that the 44 displays. Some of the key differences are that there is a clearance fiscal field that will populate with the month and fiscal year that the warrant was paid. So that means that the warrant has a current status of P for paid. And then you will see the fiscal month, fiscal year in which it cleared. The clearance date will populate when the status is P for paid as well. The fiscal year on this screen is the fiscal year the warrant was issued. And so just a key thing to remember there, the fiscal year is the year in which it was issued, and the fiscal clearance fiscal is the fiscal month, fiscal year that the warrant cleared cleared Treasury. So the difference between the 44 and 47 screen, there is no document information on the 47 screen, and there is no fiscal month, fiscal year information on the 44 screen. So that's kind of the two key differences there. Also, too, you'll notice that there is no cancellation document number on the 47 screen as well, because that is done on the 44 screen. And with that, we can go to some questions.
We did have one question just from the beginning. Could you just briefly say the difference? Why do we refer, can you explain why we refer to them as warrants instead of checks?
That is a very good question, and I'm actually going to ask that maybe Liz be able to articulate that better than myself.
Yeah, so warrants are a different legal instrument than checks. I'd have to go pull up the specific language on it, but essentially, a warrant, if we run into a budgetary situation for the state, we don't have the same legal requirements to cover it. We will pay it if we have sufficient resources, whereas a check has higher legal standards for the vendor to be able to claim it. So they're essentially the same thing, but there is some different legal requirements for each of those, depending on whether or not the state is unable to pay that amount.
Perfect. Thank you.
And then I think that's the only question we have at this time. Thanks, Justin.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, and then I think we have Scott up next, and he is going to talk about some timelines for us.
Thank you, Amber. Just to make sure everyone's aware, this is going to be pretty short and the information is going to be a little dense. And so please ask any questions that may come up. First off, we're going to be talking about two main projects, the first of which is CA View. CA View is currently in use as our repository for ordered and produced reports. They will be saved for 4 years with search regions in production, acceptance, and training. You can find more information about this during the November user group meeting 2024 or presentation. We will be implementing that for agency use around first quarter of 2026, subject to change. And there's going to be a favorites update around on November 15th with some internal broadcast training for the agencies that have signed up to be part of our pilot program. Next up, we have the electronic warrant cancel process. We will be moving warrant cancels to electronic to improve efficiency, effectiveness. And the new process will have a new form to fill out, more instructions on the first page so that everyone knows what they're doing. Electronic Adobe Digital Certified. Electronic Adobe Digital Certified signatures so that no one has to physically sign those signatures anymore. We will all be submitting it to box.com, so that will be a bit of a learning curve. We'll have identifying numbers for the warrant cancels, and we'll even have a new process for direct deposit for canceled warrants. So lots of stuff coming up on that. Go live will be beginning of January. Phase out of physical warrants will be by early to mid-March, subject to change. So you don't need to know all of this before the end of the year, but it will help, and we will stop physical warrant cancels by the time my birthday rolls around, March 17th. If you have any questions, please email me, and I'll be sure to answer them. But for right now, any questions for the presentation? Okay. I am not sure.
There is a couple of questions, but they're just more maybe suggestions, and we'll keep those things in mind. There's just making sure that we're adding note sections to each of those things so they know how to do them. It's awesome.
Mm-hmm. There will be instructions for the new warrant cancel form on the first page, so not exactly a note section, but should help you understand the process a little bit more if you were fuzzy on it. As for Antonia's question, you won't need the physical warrant submitted to us, but you will still need to keep the physical warrant for our documentation purposes. And I am not sure if a note section will be added to the stop pay thing, but we can discuss that at a later date. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. Please take it away, Amber.
Thanks, Scott. We appreciate that. My name's Amber, and if you don't know me, I am the R-Stars trainer. And so I am going to talk about just talk a little bit about our R-Stars training program this morning. So if you didn't know, we have an R-Stars training program that is offered through Workday Learning. You go in and you sign up, and we have 12 separate courses that teach you all about how to use R-Stars. So course 1 and course 2, they have to be done in order. They're prerequisites to the rest of them. But after you do course 1 and course 2, then you can skip through and you can choose which courses you would want to take. I think taking them all is the best, just because there's stuff that you learn in each of them. But if maybe your agency has some desk specific, or you're growing, in your knowledge of R-Stars, if there was something that you wanted to specifically take, after you've taken course 1 and 2, you are free to move around. So let's talk a little bit about the courses. They have simulated R-Stars practice in it. So you go in and you sign up in Workday, and one of the first things that it's going to say is that you need to send me your training access request form. So you're going to fill that out. And what that's going to allow me is to give you a fake agency and user classes so that you can get into our training region. And in the training region, you get to practice moving through R-Stars in a simulated fashion. So it's not going to produce any real payments to vendors. It's not going to produce any warrants, but there's information set up in there so that you can actually practice what you would be doing in our production region. So you can practice in our training region just general R-stars navigation and applications. You can practice transaction entry. You get to enter enough that you'll probably at some point make some errors and have a batch unbalanced. And then we can practice balancing the batch and how to fix that. And so then those things are happening in our training region and not in our production region. There's a whole class on accounts receivable, and there's a whole bunch in there. It's a really good one. There's classes on T codes, and it's going to dive into how they impact our transactions and post to our financial tables and R-stars. It's going to give you the accounting behind the 3-digit number. And so they're super helpful. It's going to go over balanced transactions and how we use those and why we use those as a state. And then there are several lessons just on transaction inquiry and how to navigate through our system. We know that it's not the normal type of system. It's not what you would normally access in the rest of your day-to-day activities. And so it is there to help you. No, not just, okay, I go here and here and here, but also you can practice the why and just different ways to move around in our system and know what's happening. They are self-study courses. They are meant to take at your own pace. If you are someone who just wants to breeze through and have all of the information, then you can run through it. But if you're someone like me who really wants to understand, you can take it at your own pace and work through it. They help you learn how we use R-stars as our accounting and reporting system. And then after you have finished the simulated practice, because that's the huge helpful part, then you get to go into Workday and you get to show us how you know all of the answers to our quizzes and follow up with that. So go back to Workday, take the quiz, and then you can move on to the next course. And if you have any questions about the R-stars training, SFMS wants to be a support to your agency and your own career growth. So reach out to us and let us know. If you have new people coming on board, reach out to me ahead of time and I'll make sure that you have all of the stuff to get them signed up to take the R-stars training, or if it's something that you want to pursue, just so that you know more about R-stars and how it works. I would love to be a help. And I'm not sure that there would be any questions, but if there was questions, I don't see any in the chat. Liz did just go over some clarity on a question that we had earlier. The check is a demand draft drawn to the Oregon State Treasury, and it's payable through the Treasury Items Processing Bank, where a warrant is a formal certification of validity of a debt with authorization or direction to the state's item processing bank to pay the debt upon presentment. And then the source there is in the chat. So that's just the difference. All right. And up next, we have Aaron Wallace, and he is going to give us a Datamart update.
Thank you, Amber. Hi, yes, I'm Aaron Wallace, and I wanted to start by thanking the SFMS team for allowing me to speak a little about what is happening with the Datamart. And of course, lots of things have been changing, and I want to make sure we're all on the same page. So first, let's start with the Datamart updates. As you may have already heard, we are transitioning away from OB as our main query tool and moving to Power BI Desktop. Not to worry, but the transition or OB will be available through December 2027. And to clarify, only the query tool is changing, not the Datamart itself. That's not changing at all. But by the end of 2027, which is just 2 years away, which time's going to fly by, so I urge you to prepare the best you can to fully recreate your queries in another tool. Because once OB is shut down, you will no longer have access to the files at all. And I can't get them back for you. They're done and they're gone. So I highly recommend mapping out all the important queries, taking screenshots, or even downloading the query criteria and filter information to help you out. Whatever you can do to make sure nothing is forgotten. I know nobody has a bunch of extra time, but if you plan appropriately, we will succeed. Next up, Power BI Desktop is our latest query tool, and I hope you've had time to review the 3 Getting Started guides that came out recently. Now, if you've yet to do this, please review the Datamart website, as well as go into Workday Learning and watch the training recording, because that was done in September. These documents and training will get you started in creating your very first Datamart query with Power BI Desktop. I've also added a common questions document to the Datamart website, so which I highly recommend you review, as it may answer a question or two that you have been wondering about. And last on this slide, tomorrow, November 5th at 10 a.m., I will be presenting a Power BI Joins Guide training. Now, I recently sent an invite and a reminder over the Datamart news list about this training. Now, if you've yet to receive the notice and you want to sign up, you can go into Workday Learning and search for Joins Training, and this training will be there and you can add it. And it's going to review a lot of great stuff, but also the guide itself is on the Datamart website. So this training is going to help you gain clear understanding of what types of joins are in the Datamart, how joins function in Power BI, best practices for joining tables in the DAS Financial Datamart, and finally, common pitfalls and how to avoid them. So this could be a complex topic. So therefore, a prerequisite was set for users to complete the Getting Started training first before attending the Joins training. Now, if you believe you are not ready or are unable to attend the training, we will be recording it and loading it to Workday Learning, hopefully in a week or two after the training. Now, once it is loaded to Workday, we will be alerting users over the news list. Next up, let's go over a current tentative timeline, which of course is subject to change. First on the list, by November, at the end of November, I hope to have the Power BI repository, or what we call workspace, ready for users. Now, this will be a brief guide on how to obtain access to the site and then download the repository files. Now, if you recall, over the years, the repository has contained various widely used queries. These are considered only templates and are up to your agency to update as needed. Since all agencies are different, the files may or may not work for your agency. But I wanted to create a similar repository as we've had in the past within Power BI. So of course, we will not have very many files to start with, but I will be working hard to add a lot more as quickly as possible. But if any user already has a Power BI file that could be used in the repository, I'd be happy if you'd send it to the Datamart support email and provide details about the query what it accomplishes. This will really help greatly because it takes quite a bit of time to rebuild all of these files. Okay, next up, by the end of January 2026, I want to provide users with an initial manual for Power BI, as well as provide a training related to the manual. Now, this manual is going to be state related, so there's a lot of information out there online and whatnot, but this is going to be more state related and contain information about the getting started, the joins guide, also formula creation, and much more. So be excited for that and look forward to it. Then by the June 30th, 2026, we plan to provide users with the DAFRA and the CIFA queries for Power BI. Now, this will allow users to test the queries for year end, but have OB for normal reporting. Now, these are very complex files and it will take us some time, so just bear with us. Also by June 2026, we plan to officially stop taking work requests to update OB's RPD. Now, the RPD is really just the behind the scenes of OB. So there's really no need to improve a product that's going to be going away in a short time, right? So we'll stop taking those requests, but we will be continuing to receive requests for the improvement of the Datamart or Power BI. So if you have any of those requests, send them to the Datamart support inbox. And the last item on this list, by the end of December 2027, we plan to shut down OB and move to full support of Power BI. Now, we are supporting both tools for a while, but our resources are limited, so it is a difficult task. However, I assure you that we want to make sure everyone is successful in this transition, so feel free to reach out and ask questions anytime. I'd be happy to help. Now, I also want to clarify and make sure all are aware that even with the transition timeline laid out here, as an agency, you still have the option to use any query tool you desire. Whether that be Excel, Access, Toad, Tableau, or something else. However, the DAS management has decided my team focus on our efforts on Power BI, and it will be your agency's responsibility to support any other query tools. So as a side note, if you choose Excel, which is also a Microsoft Query Tool product, it goes right along with Power BI. they actually have a lot of similarities, especially when it comes to grabbing the data. So if you decide that Excel works for you, then that's great. Excel and Power BI can even work together in certain circumstances. It's up to your agency to decide. Next up, I wanted to go over real quickly what is needed to start using Power BI Desktop. We still have users unaware of how to start. So let's do a quick recap just to make sure we're all on the same page. So first, download the application. Obvious, right? To do this, we must email our agency tech support for installation. They'll take care of that. But as a side note, at DAS and some other agencies, they actually have a program called Software Center, which you can actually install the application on your own. However, there's a different policy surrounding Software Center use at each agency, so make sure it is okay with your IT folks. So one additional tidbit, once you have Power BI installed, it will want to update itself, and it provides a pop-up to accomplish this task. However, do not fall for this trick and just let your IT department deal with updates. I understand these pop-ups are legit, and if you click on them, they will take you to the Microsoft site, but don't waste your time. Just let your IT take care of it. All right. Next up, obtain Datamart RACF security access. And to do this, you just email your agency security officer, and they'll walk you through the entire process. But this is a little different than OB. Remember, OB is a web-based application, and so it has a different security sign-on and credentials, while RACF security is more for desktop-type programs such as Excel, Power BI, Tableau, Access, Toad, those kind of things. And once the access is complete, you'll receive an email from the DAS RACF admin tech team letting them know you're good to go. Next up, you will need to load the Datamart ODBC called SFMS to your computer. But leave this task to your agency tech support as they are the experts. But you can confirm the installation was successful by following the guide to ODBCs that's on the Datamart site. We also discussed this guide in detail through the training, which is now in a recording on Workday Learning. Now, I highly recommend checking this out if you have yet to do it. And lastly, create a query in Microsoft Power BI Desktop and connect to the Datamart with the help of the Power BI Connect to the Datamart document, which again is on the Datamart site and discussed in the Workday Learning training. So these 4 steps will set you on the right path for successful data pulling. However, if you become confused or need any clarification on these steps or guides, please contact Datamart support. Well, thank you for your time. That's all I have today. And are there any questions?
There are questions in the chat, but we are at time, Erin. So I will send them to you and you can follow up. Sorry about that. But we will follow up with your questions and Erin will answer them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just really quick here. Again, thank you, Erin. So I just wanted to point out that we do have a contact SFMS page on the PowerPoint, and also any of the hyperlinks in our PowerPoint presentation are live and will take you to the information or resource you are looking for. Last but not least, we are right at 11, so please take our user group survey. This is a customer service satisfaction survey that will help us help you in the ways that you want to be helped. And with that, thank you all for your participation and for your collaboration and for attending today. And again, one more shameless plug, please take our survey and let us know what you would like to see next time. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate it.